Hi everyone, I'm Erin, and today I'm going to try to recreate this beautiful piece of concept art by Mary Blair. She painted this back in 1950 for Disney's Alice in Wonderland, and like Mary Blair, I'll be using gouache, but unlike Mary, I'm using acrylic gouache, which means you can't reactivate it after it dries. I started with the background doing a gradient that was quite watered down and then a second coat that had more paint. I used my flathead brush for that, but I've moved on now to my round brush, a number 7. And this is a great size brush to use. This one is a watercolor brush made from sable, but the reason this size, I really like the size, is because you can do thicker lines or thinner lines. So it really depends on how much pressure you put on the brush. And because it's a larger brush, it holds more paint. So you don't have to keep going back to load your brush, which is great because with this kind of painting, you want to go quickly. You don't really want to have to keep going back to your palette to get more paint. Yeah, it's energetic painting. I really love the way I work when I replicate Mary Blair because it's so much different than how I usually work. I'm usually very controlled, and she's taught me to loosen up a bit. And now I've moved on to my number 4 brush, also a sable brush. This is a Series 7 by Winsor Newton. I love these. More expensive, but worth it. I've got both my reds here. I'm starting with my true red, which is a warm red that I'll use for painting the top part of the mushroom, and then I'll use primary magenta for the bottom part of the mushroom, which is more of a cool red. You'll notice that the paint isn't totally opaque. Even after a second coat, you can see a little bit of that blue, the background coming through, and that's kind of a good thing in this case. Well, it is a good thing because it adds atmosphere when you've got that background coming through all the different elements of the painting. It gives them cohesion and you get a really strong mood. Now I'm adding a tiny bit of green, which is the complementary color to that red, and that takes away the chroma, gives it a little bit of depth, makes it darker. And now mixing my blues together, the ultramarine and cyan, to do the caterpillar. And I had a little bit of anxiety about doing this guy because whenever it comes to painting creatures or people, I always want things to look more precise, but I just thought of it as a series of shapes. I learned that once in a drawing class, that if you just look at people or things, living things, as a series of shapes, it takes away the pressure. His little belly is so cute. And now for the hard part, getting out my black here to do these tiny little details. And I should have used an even smaller brush, maybe a 2. And I really hesitate here to do this. Yeah, it's difficult. And yes, use a smaller brush to paint this tube that goes between the hookah and the mouthpiece. And I tried to fix it, which just made it worse. So I should have just stuck with the first swirl of my brush. What I would recommend is when you have to do a spontaneous line like that, paint with confidence and don't try to fix it afterwards. I'm doing something here that I usually say not to do, which is paint an outline and fill it in, but sometimes it's the better choice. I think one of the benefits of replicating a painting especially of an artist that you really love, is you learn so much about how to use techniques that you might not otherwise be using, because usually I paint very graphically, and I've learned to loosen up, and I've learned some other interesting techniques. For example, this smoke, I realized as I was painting it that I've never painted smoke before, and I wouldn't have painted it like this. So it really has taught me a lot about technique. And we're all done, and there's the reveal.